What classifies as a villain? Oxford defines a villain in its basic definition as a character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot. But what happens when the villain turns out to be the hero and sees himself as such despite his villainous behavior? Hey everyone, I'm Sebastian from Cinemageddon Reviews, and taking part of this year's annual YouTube event, I'm going to be talking about one villainous scene involving the greatest anti-villain of all time, Ozymandias from Watchmen. Spoiler alert for the events of the
Of course, my moral safeguards gave me pause as a necessary sacrifice. A few key regions around the globe. New York, Los Angeles, Moscow, Hong Kong. Disintegrated in an instant. 15 million people killed by Dr. Manhattan himself. The world's punishment for flirting with World War III.
Ozymandias represents the blind moral ambiguity of being a hero. You know what you're doing is well-intentioned, and even in your warped mind, what you're doing is for the better part of the world. But one never takes a moment to consider how drastic and how severe the consequences for these actions and ideas are. Ozymandias, on the other hand, was perfectly aware of the horrifying consequences that would come from his actions. He lied, manipulated, and killed his way into perfecting the final stages for what is arguably the most logical plan one could think of in a politically hot climate such as his own. We as human beings are incapable of saving ourselves, as we are prone to violence and anger and are more likely to destroy each other before we can work together to save ourselves. Ozymandias understood this flawed philosophy so well and did everything in his power to put an end to it. In his own account, he is the hero, and the world's strongest superpowers aren't coming from superheroes. They're coming from corrupt politicians in Russia and America. The only way for two great enemies to work together is by sharing one common foe. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, after all, and in this case, the enemy would come in the form of a giant squid from space.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Or by detonating reactors in the US and the USSR's major cities, generating a radioactive decay signature similar to Dr. Manhattan's. However you look at it, the plan is clear. Cause a catastrophic event on both the US and Soviet Russia, have them both come to the understanding that the attack did not come from either force, unite both countries with one common goal, and end the Cold War once and for all. Peace and love at the cost of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. My one villainous scene is probably the most iconic villain monologue I can think of, starting off very cliche with the hero surrounding the villain as he monologues about his evil plan, letting his hubris overwhelm him and control his better judgment, believing he had already won, and despite the heroes uniting to stop him, their efforts are futile. We all know how villains meet their fall from grace from this moment. But you forget, Ozymandias isn't a villain, he's a hero. He's the hero, and the hero always wins. Especially when that hero happens to be the smartest man in the world and says this.
Do that, Rorschach? I'm not a comic book villain. Do you seriously think I'd explain my masterstroke to you if there were even the slightest possibility you could affect the outcome? I triggered it 35 minutes ago.
Millions of lives lost, billions of lives shocked and appalled. The US and Russia realized that their petty fighting was all for nothing, and peace is declared almost immediately. Ozymandias stands victorious not for causing the deaths of millions, but for arguably saving the lives of billions and more to come. The man who idolized two of the most powerful men to ever walk the earth, men who viewed themselves as gods among us, was now standing, a god among his former friends, knowing well that his mind just saved the world, and finally, after so many years, he lived up to the heroes of his youth. So, what classifies as a villain? Honestly, the title is too vague for a simple explanation to make it clear. Adrian Veidt was seen as a hero to millions. His actions, however, were those of a villain. How do you identify someone whose villainous deeds are those done for the greater good? It always takes one person with power to look upon themselves and say, the world needs me, whether they want it or not. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the anatomy of an anti-villain. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like what you see here and you want to see more, be sure to like, share the video with your friends, and subscribe for more content. And if you'd like to support the show, then check out our Patreon page for bonus content and exclusive rewards, including the chance to request for a movie or show for us to review in the future. I'd like to give a special shout out to Nando V Movies, whose wonderful take on Thanos and Loki is what motivated me to make my own video talking about my own choice for a one villainous scene. If you guys haven't checked out his channel yet, I highly recommend you do so. As always, I'm Sebastian from Cinemageddon Review signing out, and I'll see you on the wasteland.